In this part of the course, we shift from theory to practice. You've already seen what an X.509 certificate contains. Now we'll look at how to inspect a real certificate and decide whether you should trust it. We'll walk through reading the key fields, checking the certificate chain back to a trusted root, and verifying signatures and expiry. You'll also see how to spot common issues, like mismatched host names, wrong key usages, or incomplete chains that often break TLS in real environments. By the end, you should feel confident taking any certificate from a browser, server, or device, and systematically answering 3 questions. Who issued it? Who is it for? And is it valid right now? For this module, think of yourself as a certificate detective. Your job isn't just to check the green lock. It's to understand why a connection fails, whether a site is really who it claims to be, and whether it meets your organization's security rules. In practice, that means 3 roles. First, debugging. When TLS handshakes break or APIs suddenly stop talking, you'll use certificate details to pinpoint what went wrong. Second, verification. You'll confirm that certificates haven't been spoofed or swapped, and that they tie back to a trusted authority. Third, compliance. You'll check that algorithms, key lengths, and lifetimes align with internal policies and external standards. By the end of this module, you'll be able to read certificate files, trace their chain of trust, and quickly spot the misconfigurations that cause incidents before they hit production. When we talk about certificates in the real world, we're mostly talking about a few common file formats. Knowing these makes it much easier to debug issues and talk to ops or developers. PEM is the text-based standard you'll see everywhere. It's base 64 encoded and usually starts with begin certificate. You can open it in any text editor, and it often holds certificates or keys, sometimes several in one file. DIR has the same information, but stored as compact binary. It's meant for machines, not humans, and is common on certain platforms and devices. You'll also see generic certificate files like .crt, which can be either PEM or DER, depending on how they were created. Private keys are usually stored in .key files. These must be guarded carefully, because anyone with that file can impersonate your system. For bundling .p12 or PKCS number 12, packages can carry both the certificate and the private key together, typically protected by a password. In Java ecosystems, .jks is a key store container that can hold many keys and certificates for an application. At a high level, your job is to recognize these formats and treat anything containing private keys as highly sensitive. The format may change, but the trust those files represent should always be protected. When you're debugging certificates in the real world, you really only need 3 basic moves: inspect, verify, and probe. First, inspection. You take a certificate file and decode it into human-readable form. That lets you see who it's issued to, who issued it, validity dates, key usages, and any odd extensions. Think of this as putting the cert under a microscope before you trust it. Next comes verification. Here you're asking, does this certificate actually chain up to a CA I trust? The tool checks the signature and the chain against a set of known roots or intermediates. If that fails, you know you have a broken chain, a wrong CA bundle, or a possible spoof. Finally, the remote check. Instead of looking at a file, you connect to a live server and pull the certificate straight from the handshake. This is how you confirm what a client really sees in production, including intermediates and hostname matching. Together, these 3 actions make you the first line of defense against certificate misconfigurations and connection failures. When you look at certificate details in a tool like OpenSSL, focus on a few high-value fields instead of reading everything. Start with the subject. That tells you who this certificate claims to represent: a website, a service, a device, or a person. If that identity doesn't match what you intended to connect to, stop right there. Then, look at the issuer. That's the certificate authority that signed it. You're asking, do I and do my systems actually trust this CA? If the issuer is unknown or unexpected, that's a red flag. Next, check the validity period. The not before and not after dates define the window in which this certificate is supposed to be used. An expired or not yet valid certificate may indicate misconfiguration, or in some cases, an attempted attack. Finally, review the public key algorithm and size. This tells you whether the cryptography is still considered strong enough for your risk profile and regulatory requirements. If you can reliably answer 4 questions: who is this for? Who signed it? Is it within its valid time? And is the crypto acceptable? You're already acting as the first line of defense against many certificate-related failures. When your browser connects to a secure site, it doesn't just trust the site's certificate blindly. It walks a trust chain step by step. At the top of that chain is a root certificate authority. Roots are self-signed and baked into your operating system or browser as inherently trusted identities. Below that are one or more intermediate CAs. Each intermediate is signed by a root and in turn is allowed to issue certificates for others. This layering lets us keep the highly sensitive root keys offline, while using intermediates for day-to-day operations. At the bottom is the end entity or leaf certificate, like the certificate for a website or API. That certificate is signed by an intermediate. To decide whether to trust the leaf, the client verifies each signature upward until it reaches a root it already trusts. If any link is missing or invalid, for example, the intermediate certificate isn't present, the path to the root can't be built, and the connection should be treated as untrusted. When you're looking at certificates in a browser, treat it as a fast health check before you reach for heavy tools like OpenSSL. The browser is already doing chain validation, hostname checks, and expiry checks for you. That simple lock icon and connection is secure message means the certificate chains to a trusted CA. It's within its validity period. It matches the site name, and the handshake completed without obvious issues. For deeper troubleshooting, you can open the certificate details and see who issued it, which intermediate CAs are in the chain, and what key usages are allowed. That helps you quickly answer: is this a public CA or an internal one? Is the right hostname covered? And are we actually talking to the server we expect? Use this quick visual inspection first. If something looks off, like an unexpected issuer, a broken chain, or a hostname mismatch, that's your signal to capture more details and move to command line tools for a full investigation. When you think about validating certificates, split your mindset into 2 phases: before deployment and after deployment. Before deployment, you're still in a safe hangar. Here, you verify that the certificate is valid in time and that its validity window covers your planned go live and any grace period. You confirm that all the subject alternative names actually match the domains and host names you intend to serve. You also build and test the full chain to a trusted root, making sure every required intermediate is present. Finally, you verify the digital signature so you know the certificate hasn't been tampered with and really comes from the issuing CA. Once it's live, you move into in-flight checks. You confirm that browsers and clients accept the certificate without warnings. You ensure the page is fully protected by HTTPS, with no mixed content that quietly downgrades security. And you put monitoring in place, so you get alerted well before expiry or chain issues cause an outage. The key idea is that certificate validation is not a one-time event. It's a continuous process from initial issuance through the entire lifetime of the service. By this point, you've seen how certificates are supposed to work. Now let's look at why they so often fail in production. A classic issue is relying on self-signed certs outside of development. They're convenient for quick tests, but in production they break the trust chain and force users to click through scary warnings. Name problems are next. If the certificate doesn't list the right host names in the subject alternative name, browsers and APIs will reject it, even if everything else is correct. Assert, for example.com will not safely cover api.example.com unless it's explicitly included. Expiry is the silent killer. The crypto is fine, the CA is trusted, but the not after date has passed, and suddenly your site or API is down. Many large outages you read about are just certificates that weren't renewed in time. Trust anchor issues show up as untrusted root. That usually means the client doesn't have the issuing CA in its trust store, which is common with internal or private PKI. On the security side, exposed private keys are an emergency. If a key leaks, you must revoke the certificate and reissue with a new key pair immediately. Otherwise, attackers can impersonate your service. Weak algorithms are another risk. If you're still using deprecated ciphers or hash functions like RC4 or SHA1, modern clients will either warn or refuse to connect, and you're exposed to known cryptographic attacks. Finally, even when the crypto is solid, using the wrong certificate type or key usage can break things. For example, trying to use a client authentication certificate for a server, or vice versa. The pattern here is important. Most production problems are not exotic hacks. They're basic hygiene issues that good process and automation can completely prevent. You now have a picture of how basic certificate validation works. Advanced teams go a step further with pinning and monitoring to reduce real-world risk. Certificate pinning means your application doesn't just trust any certificate from a trusted CA. It expects a very specific identity, usually a certificate fingerprint or public key. If an attacker tricks or compromises a CA and issues a rogue cert, the pin won't match and the connection is blocked. That's powerful protection against man-in-the-middle attacks. But it comes with a cost. You must carefully plan key rotation and app updates, or you can lock yourself out of your own service. Monitoring tackles a different problem: operational failures. Every certificate has an expiry date, and outages from forgotten renewals are painfully common. Good PKI operations continuously scan certificates, track how many days are left, and trigger alerts well before expiry. In mature setups, renewals are automated end-to-end, so a cert never expires silently. Together, pinning defends against fake identities, and monitoring defends against downtime from your real identities. Both are essential if you're running high-value, internet-facing systems. Now let's talk about how you actually inspect certificates in practice. Think in terms of 3 layers of tools. At the deepest level, command line tools like OpenSSL or Java's key tool give you full power. You can dump every field, verify chains, test protocols, and script checks into your CI pipeline. They're less friendly, but they're the gold standard for serious troubleshooting and automation. When you just want a quick health check of a site, online validators are faster. Services like SSL Labs connect to the server, grade the configuration, and highlight obvious problems such as weak ciphers, missing intermediates, or protocol issues. Certificate transparency viewers let you see how and where a certificate is logged in the ecosystem. For everyday work, your browser is your assistant. Built-in dev tools and lightweight extensions let you click and inspect the certificate presented to your session, confirm the chain, and spot mismatches without leaving the page. In practice, you'll often start with the browser, confirm with an online scanner, and then drop to the command line when you need precise, low-level answers or automation. Let's walk through some troubleshooting patterns and connect them to the PKI concepts you've learned. When a browser says not secure or shows a red line, It usually means the certificate either isn't signed by a trusted CA or it has expired. Your mental checklist should start with: who issued this certificate? Does the chain reach a trusted root? And is the validity period still current? If an API connection just drops without a clear error, think about the intermediate chain. Servers often present the leaf certificate, but forget one or more intermediates. The client then can't build a full chain to a trusted root and aborts the handshake. Fixing that is often as simple as installing the complete chain on the server. When a mobile app fails, but the same endpoint works fine in a browser, suspect certificate pinning. The app may be pinned to a different root or intermediate than the one you just deployed. Any change in issuing CA or in the path can break those clients, even though the certificate is perfectly valid for the web. If a load balancer shows handshake failures or 502 errors, look at how certificates and protocols are bound to listeners. A common mistake is using a certificate that doesn't match the hostname, or assigning a cert to a listener that only supports incompatible protocols or ciphers. The key takeaway: most PKI issues in production aren't exotic crypto failures. They're chain, trust store, and configuration mismatches. If you can systematically map symptoms back to these few root causes, you can diagnose PKI problems much faster. At this point, you've seen that reading a certificate is part skills, part mindset. First, use the right tools. Browsers are fine for a quick green lock check, but for real troubleshooting and security work, you rely on tools like OpenSSL to inspect every field and the full chain. Next, focus on the anatomy. Always ask 3 questions. Who is this certificate about, which you see in the common name and subject? Who is vouching for it, which is the issuer? And where is it valid, which comes from the subject alternative names and other extensions that define its scope. Finally, think in terms of process, not snapshots. Certificate validation is a chain of trust from the leaf back to a trusted root, plus a time window. If any link in that chain is untrusted, misissued, or expired, the whole thing fails. A certificate that looks fine in isolation is worthless, unless the chain is trusted and the timing is correct. As you go deeper into PKI, 3 resources will save you a huge amount of time and guesswork. First, RFC 5280 is the formal rulebook for X.509 certificates and certificate paths. You don't need to read it cover to cover, but knowing it exists and skimming the sections on extensions and path validation helps you understand why tools behave the way they do. Second, the OpenSSL man pages are your definitive reference when a command line flag is confusing or poorly documented in a blog post. When something breaks, checking the man page often reveals subtle defaults or edge cases you'd otherwise miss. Third, Better TLS gives you a curated set of weird real-world TLS test cases. It's perfect for validating that your own PKI or TLS stack handles corner cases correctly, not just the happy path. Keep these 3 handy, and whenever you hit a tricky certificate or handshake bug, use them as your starting point for deeper debugging. By now, you should be comfortable opening a certificate, spotting the subject and issuer, and following the chain up to a trusted root. Take a moment to think about troubleshooting. If a site breaks, can you tell whether it's a missing intermediate, an expired cert, or a mismatch in the name or key usage? That's the practical value of mastering certificate reading. It turns vague TLS errors into clear, actionable causes. Next, we'll shift from reading certificates to protecting the keys behind them. We'll look at how private keys should be generated, stored, backed up, rotated, on how hardware security modules help keep those keys out of reach from attackers and even insiders.